The topic is, and I'll just read this out, digital revolution goes mainstream. What behavioural changes and patterns of usage trends do policy and regulation need to stay abreast of? Now, we've had a quick chat amongst the panel members, and I think we're going to have quite a wide range of views on this because it seems quite a wide topic, a crystal ball topic. Before we start, just talking about data protection issues, I've got some doodles here from Goran's pad. I've marked it private, unopened, and it's old-style paper, so if he's around, I'll give them to him after the session. Goran also said, and it's another T-shirt slogan, be nice to your regulator. I'm a regulator. I work currently at the ICTA, the Information and Communications Technology Authority, large title, in the Cayman Islands as their General Counsel and Deputy Director of Industry Affairs. Prior to that, I was in the Ofcom legal team. Now, a lot of people have said yesterday and today that this is a chance for regulators to retool, to look at things differently, a 5G regulator, if you want. And also, there have been many comments about regulators not suppressing innovation, creating an ecosystem that supports industry. But I will bear in mind, and a few others have already, that there's always the need to look towards the consumer, the customer, to ensure that there are the right protections in place while innovation is allowed to develop. Amongst those are ensuring that consumers are informed about what they're doing, or what they purchase. They're protected from unfair practices. And industry takes a real look at cybersecurity issues going forward, especially given the IoT of things that we were discussing in the last session. Deepak Jacob, I don't know if you're around, but your presentation yesterday, you referenced regulatory prescriptions being like an elephant riding a camel. I thought that was quite a good analogy. And I'm trying to think, and you may have some ideas, of what better transport an elephant should have in a regulatory world. And I want some ideas as part of this session to look at how to deal with future developments. It's such an issue for regulators. Sometimes you always feel as if you're one or two steps behind things, and it's not a nice place to be at times. In the Cayman Islands, we're looking at our regulatory structure, and indeed, we've got an opportunity to retool. And one of the things I want to take away from this conference and this session are ideas about how best to do that. Practical ideas from industry. We're very open to these things. Now, you didn't come here to listen to me speak, so we'll start the session in earnest. We've just rearranged the speakers, given that Kevin's just popped out for a coffee and will be back shortly. He's catching up with a few things. So first up, and it's my pleasure to introduce, and you have the bios, I think, on the website, so please have a look. We have David Wheeldon, Director of Policy and Public Affairs from Sky.
I'm going to stand up because I've got some slides. I drew the short straw in being asked to go first, so I will do my best to make this entertaining. This is a very wide topic. Quite hard to know exactly how to approach it. So you could go at 20,000 feet or you could go at 20. I get vertigo, so we're going to do 20. So what I want to do first, because I think in addressing the question that we've been put, which is, are we dealing with audiences and users in the right way, it's really important to understand the business models and the business products that the consumer products that our customers are using. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about our business and the way in which we are taking a traditional TV business onto the digital stage, and very much about how, for us, digital is mainstream. So Sky is Europe's largest entertainment company, so we are absolutely mass market. And I want to talk about our experience as a mass market content and television business. One of our newest platforms, for example, Now TV, which I'll talk about a little bit, is Europe's leading OTT service, and I think that is a business that we're very proud of, and that is giving some experiences to us about how our customers expect us to treat them, particularly in terms of content protection, and that's an example I want to use in a minute of how businesses are responding to the changes of use of traditional services. So we've got 21 million customers in Europe. They buy about 54 million products from us a year. 9 million of the homes that we serve are connected, and we've got 10 million customers using our mobile and OTT services. Makes us, I think, the largest mobile television provider in Europe. And this is a really exciting world. I mean, there has never been more ways to watch TV, and we're able to increasingly cater for the diversity in the ways that people want to view it and their viewing behaviours. And one of the ways we've done that is to launch a OTT service, which is for everyone who doesn't already have pay TV. We saw an opportunity to open up the pay TV market to a group of customers who would traditionally, if you ask them, say, no, we don't take pay TV. And even now, very often, those of us that are paying us good money for it say, no, they're not pay TV customers, because what we've given them is the kind of service that doesn't require the traditional hardware-heavy approach, doesn't lock them into long contracts, allows them to purchase great content as they go. It's available on over 60 devices, including apps on smartphones, connected TVs, games consoles, and the bespoke Now TV box. And it appeals to a growing number of consumers who want to supplement their TV viewing, particularly the TV viewing that they get for free. They're also generally accustomed to paying for content digitally, and this gives them the ability to gain control, convenience, and gives them more choice. Now, the interesting thing about these customers is that we don't really think about them in demographic terms, and we certainly don't think of them about their propensity to use digital products. So the kind of, I think it's the e-emersives to a-digitals terminology is one I've heard but never really fully understood, because as a business, we just don't really think about it like this. What we think about as a mass market business is we think about attitude, and in particular we think about attitude to watching television and to paying for it. And because we're catering to a wide range of TV audiences and TV watching behaviours, what we've done is to focus on sort of distinctive behavioural segments, and also to the loyal sort of core viewers as well, who want to subscribe to more than one package. So we don't necessarily target a specific age range. In fact, there are more over 60s accessing the Now TV service, pure digital over-the-top service, than there are under 25s. And the other interesting thing is that what we've learned is that the main TV is really important to these customers. So what we've done is we've sort of created a plug-in-and-play environment where you don't need to be an immersive to use it. You just simply plug the box in. It's really easy to use, or you access it via the app. So a simple setup, user interface is critical. I mean, obviously we're competing with Netflix, So we need to make it simple. But we're offering something that's a bit different and appeals to people who may not consider themselves to be necessarily Netflix-type customers. They're often from a segment who don't see digital or don't see themselves as sort of digital customers. They often can be quite traditional. And the box has been really important. So one of the things we've discovered is that actually watching on the small screen via an app is a relatively low number of hours for the Now TV audience base. Watching on the big screen via a connected TV or via a Now TV box is by far and away the greatest number of viewing hours. And the main screen, the TV, is really important. The other thing we've discovered when we launched the Now TV apps and boxes, we discovered that more people were searching out live TV than we were expecting. Actually, when we first launched, we'd sort of buried live TV down in the, you had to navigate through about 11 clicks to get to it. And it was a realization, actually, live TV is still incredibly powerful. And this is not just for sport, by the way. This is for the schedule. It has a very powerful resonance with these customers. So we've made it much, much easier to watch a live TV channel. Now, I want to sort of delve into one of the things that I think is important for regulators in particular to understand in this new world, and to talk about consumer behavior and then consumer protection in that world. Consumer protection is really important because we're a family brand. We're in people's homes. We're bought by the purchasers, the decision maker in the household for the whole household. And they expect us to give them the kind of protections that they have long been used to. So one of the things that we've done is to take what we know works in a linear world and brought it into the digital world. So we've created a digital watershed, which is a series of tools that provides protection and assurance to customers on our platforms in a way that the time-based watersheds that apply in our market did on linear TV in the analog age. So on the set-top box, there's PIN protection, but there's PIN protection that allows you to apply it to a time limit that people are familiar with. And the ability to lock recordings and channels on time-based PIN controls takes what people have known previously and gives them some control in using the new digital tools. And similarly, we've been offering PIN protection for a number of years on the set-top box. We've taken that and we've applied it to Now TV. And we're also launching a dedicated kids TV app, which will also have options to filter content. A view log that will allow for bedtime settings to limit usage, and also to see what's been watched. And we want kids to have access on whatever device they want, but in a way that parents know is ultimately safe. And interestingly, so through all of this, we conducted a lot of customer research, as you can imagine, with a base as large as ours. 97% of our customers are aware of the controls, the parental controls that are offered. And in fact, more than half, 51% of parents use our parental controls, which I think is a pretty high number given that families will different age range of kids. The kind of core message I want to leave with you is that it's really important in this world, in the digital world, to give customers the tools that they intuitively understand, and to also trust them to make the decisions to protect themselves. I think that we sometimes get caught up in the idea that because there's new technology, we should do it in a new way. But actually, when it comes to things like content protection, challenging customers is not really what they're looking for, and doesn't really provide the kind of universal protection that actually we as a society would expect. So we really have learned to go with the grain with our customers. And I want to just give one final example here. Sky is also an internet access provider. So in the UK, we're number 2 in the market with about 5 million customers. And when we decided to look at what sort of parental controls that we could offer in that space, we decided to roll out a filter which gives customers the ability to actually control what comes into their home via the internet. So we launched a thing called Sky Broadband Shield, which uses the familiar watershed settings from the old linear TV world going back decades, the 9 p.m. watershed. So you can turn filters on and off and automatically set them to turn on and off at a 9 p.m. watershed. So parents are used to it. And we also used age ratings, which of course they're very familiar with in a movie setting and indeed in a TV setting, because we use similar age ratings for our TV services. And applied that to the Shield service. So it's recognized tools that they can apply in the home. And actually what we also did is we turned this on for all our customers. Unlike other internet providers who sort of make it as an option, something that people have to make a choice over, we actually turned it on. So automatic filter in the home, which is quite controversial. I think we weren't too sure how that would go down, but staggeringly, 70% of our customers have chosen to keep it switched on because it's really easy to understand. And of a customer base of over 5 million, we had 21 incoming calls when we did this. So I just want to leave you with the idea that none of this is done because of regulation. And the message to regulators a little bit is, and actually interestingly I think it's picked up on the previous panel, you do need to allow flexibility, particularly for service providers, to design tools that they know their customers are going to respond to properly, and to be flexible to allow things to develop. Also do recognise that we're not necessarily in conflict here between the service provider and the regulator and the political class who have an interest in this, because we have a massive commercial incentive to look after our customers. Trust and reputation are absolutely vital to a brand that is in over 20 million homes. But regulation must be nuanced, and it must allow businesses that have a wide customer base to respond to their behaviours and use the lessons that we've learned over many years of how customers respond to these things to build out services and products. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. We'll now move on to the next presenter, Dr. Robert Pepper, Vice President, Global Technology Policy at Cisco Systems.
Thank you. While they're putting the slides up, it's always great to be back at IIC. I've been, it's a great organization. I've been working with them when I was going back to when I was still at the FCC, which makes me think of, as you mentioned, Goran's statement yesterday, be nice to your regulator, right? So, but I joke I'm a recovering regulator. And I wake up
How long have you been in therapy for?
Well, I was going to say, I wake up every morning, look in the mirror, and say I'm a regulator but haven't regulated today. It's the first in the 12-step program for the recovering regulators. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to focus on the part of the panel that's about patterns of usage. And it's really a tale of two networks. If I can figure out how to make this work. Every year, and you've seen, many of you have seen much of some of the data. We do a study every year called the Visual Networking Index. It's a 5-year rolling forecast of data about everything to do with the internet. We've been doing this for 10 years, so because it's a 5-year forecast and we've been doing it for 10 years, we actually do something most people never do when they make forecasts. We go back and we report out, how did we do? And once again, this year's data is within 10% of what we forecast on the conservative side, and that's usually where we are. We're usually within 10%. So the data that you will see, which is our latest forecast, I'm very confident in the data, in its reliability. But again, it's a forecast. It's not precise, but based upon the validity of what we've done previously, I'm pretty confident. I will make one comment about one place where I hope I'm wrong, but I'll come back to that later. So overall, what we see is globally, internet traffic growing at a 23% compounded annual growth rate. All right, so internet traffic is still growing and growing quite fast. What's driving that? Well, first of all, more users. What we're forecasting is that by 2019, between now and then, over the next 5 years, there will be another 1.1 billion people connected to the internet. At the same time, we're forecasting there'll be another 10.2 billion devices connected to the internet with IP-enabled addresses. There'll be billions of more things connected, but without an IP address, right? Like RFID chips and a lot of other things. The average speed of networks is going to more than double, and video is going to drive the traffic on the internet. Globally, it's going to be about 80% of the traffic. So there are two numbers that jump out, 1 billion and 10 billion. And this is a really important milestone, because what that means in the forecast is that 51% of the world's population will be connected to the net in 2019, in 5 years. That still means there's going to be another 49% who are not yet connected, and there are a number of initiatives. Yesterday we heard some of them. We may hear more today. Efforts globally to connect not just the next billion, which organically is going to happen, but the next billion after that, billion after that, and billion after that. And in fact, last week at the UN, in the event that Bruce mentioned, where we had, it was hosted by the US government, head of the World Bank, and the president of Estonia, the US government launched its Global Connect initiative, which has a target of connecting another 1.5 billion people over the next 5.5 or 6 years. What's driving the traffic is video, and it's not just on fixed networks. We're forecasting globally 80% of the internet traffic in 2019 is going to be video. That's going to be download, streaming, two-way, right? All kinds of video. What we also see is that this is not just over fixed networks. If you look at the traffic forecast for wireless or mobile operators networks, that's going to be over 70% of the traffic, even on mobile operators networks. And I'm very careful to say mobile operators networks, and I don't say mobile network, because I have no idea what a mobile network is. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, there is no such thing as a mobile network. The network doesn't move. The network is not mobile. I am. And so what you need to do is think about the implications of that for the architecture. Because the first thing that happens when I'm on, a mobile operator's network with one of these things with a SIM card, right, is that it goes to a base station, and what happens? It goes into a fixed network. And that, by the way, is why what Chairman Sharma talked about in the last session about the National Optical Fiber Network connecting to the 250,000 panchaya and eventually connecting the 600,000 villages in India is so important. Because even if you have a wireless connection in the village, it has to go back into a fixed network. So the agenda and the roadmap for Digital India totally gets this, right? And that's why it's so important, right? Because there is no such thing as a mobile network. right? And it's a great laugh line because everybody, the first time I used it actually was at a Mobile World Congress meeting, all mobile operators, and I said it, and it was dead silence in the room. Like, who is this jerk? Right? What is he talking about? So, video is driving. It's, in terms of video, there's a couple of things, right? And we just heard some of these. So it's not just that people are watching more video online. They are. But it's also that when we move from standard definition to high definition to ultra high definition online, standard definition stream is about 2 megabits per second. High definition stream is 7 megabits per second. Ultra high definition 4K video is 18 megabits per second. So even if we were not increasing the amount of time, the amount of data going across the networks to the devices that's going to be really crucial. Second, the devices are consuming more data when they're watching video, when you're watching video, because the size and resolution of the screen is really important. The larger the screen, the faster the chipset on the device, the greater the consumption of the data. But of course, I don't need as many pixels on this as I need on this big flat panel TV, right? And so you need to have rate adaptive software and applications so that you're not, if you're sending all of the bits to my smartphone, I'm throwing most of them away. I've wasted the network capacity. But if I'm sending the number of bits for my iPhone to the big screen, it's not going to look very good, right? So so the complexity of managing for video is actually quite complex because some of it's going to be streaming, which is going to be latency sensitive. Some's going to be download, which is not going to be latency sensitive. So that's the tale of one network. The capacity and the demand is being driven by video, video, and video. But when we take a look at the number of devices that are going to be connected, right? The forecast of by 2019, 24.5 billion IP-enabled devices connected to the networks globally. 43% of those, 10.5 billion, will be machine-to-machine devices. That's sort of the basis for the Internet of Things discussion that we had on the last session. So then there are going to be, another 14 billion things of smartphones, non-smartphones, dumb phones, voice only, TVs, PCs, tablets, and other. But I want to focus on this M to M. What are those? What's interesting is if you take a look, it's 43% of the devices, but it's only going to be 3% of the traffic. So there's this little bit of a disconnect. People say, oh, there are billions of these devices. We need, that much more spectrum because they think of it as though it's going to be the same kind of devices that are going to be driven by the high-definition video. But if you think about what those devices are, and we've actually looked at that, and in the forecast, what we've identified is, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but when you came in downstairs, there was a surveillance camera, right? That's continuous, it's broadband, it's sensitive to latency, it has Ethernet, and it has a power source. On the other hand, there are devices that are sensors that we've heard about that are going to be in the agricultural field that will be sensing moisture, temperature for remote control of irrigation systems. These are going to be little devices. The device is going to be sending out very low power. The device is going to wake up, chirp a little bit of data, go back to sleep. Latency is not a particular issue, right? Most of the billions of the devices are going to look like that. But in the car, we're forecasting that there'll be an average by 2019, about 250 million connected cars on the road. That doesn't mean self-driving. But connected cars, the average connected car will have 4 modules. Each module will have multiple sensors, right? Some of those sensors, tire pressure, oil pressure, not latency sensitive. Airbag goes off, that's really latency sensitive. I don't want it to wait. I want that emergency service right away. So there are going to be a wide range of these different types of devices and the requirements. Now, 43%, right, we're forecasting that on average, 43% of the devices will be M2M, but when we take a look at the global forecast, you know, Korea, it's going to be 72%, Japan, 68%. Here in the US, 58%. Across Europe, 50%. China, 46%. Those are all above average. But when we begin to look at the emerging markets, this, in my mind, is an emerging third wave of a digital divide, which is really unacceptable. The first digital divide was in phones. That's essentially, with mobile, we've overcome that. The second digital divide was in connecting to the internet, and we now see the roadmap to close that digital divide. We're not there yet, but we have the roadmap. What we see here from the data and the forecast is a third emerging digital divide in machine-to-machine and the Internet of Things. And if you look at across LATAM as an average, we're forecasting only 31% of the devices connected will be M2M. Middle East Africa, 17%, and in India, only 13%. I said earlier, I'm very confident in the data, but there's one thing I hope I'm wrong about. And I really hope that the forecast is wrong about the forecast of the lack of connections for M2M in emerging countries. It is avoidable. There's some things that we can do now to do that, and that goes back to the policy conversation of IO, related back to the Internet of Things. My colleague John Garrity and I, John's sitting over here, we're finishing up a paper with the UN Broadband Commission looking specifically at the Internet of Things for development and the economic benefit applying these in emerging economies. All right, and why is that important? Because when we've looked at what these devices are as part of the forecast, we actually have visibility into the types of devices. Almost half will be in the connected home. But then you take a look at the other verticals. The fastest growing is connected health. There are not going to be a lot of devices in connected factories, manufacturing, but economically, those are going to have a disproportionate economic benefit. The majority of the devices may have some touch point to a consumer, and therefore raises some of the privacy questions that were raised in the last panel. But there's going to be billions of these devices with huge positive economic impact that is not going to be touching a consumer. It's going to be in the industrial space, in the manufacturing space. And in fact, we've identified, and this is an eye chart, these will all be available to you, 9 plus other includes 3, 12 different verticals in which the machine-to-machine and the Internet of Things is absolutely crucial, and this is growing in both economic importance and social importance. So we have really a duality of the network. This network, the tale of two networks. The capacity is being driven by video. The number of devices is being driven by machine to machine. So we have this duality, and that's leading to incredible complexity. So we have to manage not just for capacity and congestion, we have to manage for complexity. On the one hand, you have all of this video, video, video. On the other side, it's billions of little devices waking up and chirping and going to sleep and waking up again, and some of which are very sensitive to latency. How do we manage for that? Takeaways. right? I've already said the first two. Traffic is being driven by video, connections by devices, growing network complexity. The key is that users, people that are going to be using either the video or the devices in the home or in the car or for healthcare, expect to be connected on every platform everywhere. We need to manage for complexity as well as capacity and congestion. And by the way, because of this heterogeneity of devices and requirements, the spectrum requirements are going to be very, very heterogeneous. It's not one size fits all. Some is going to be devices are going to communicate over short distance, some long distance. Some are going to chirp little bits of data, some are going to be continuous. Some are narrowband, some broadband. Some sensitive to latency, some not sensitive to latency. So the spectrum requirements are going to be very, very different. And by the way, 5G may begin to meet some of those requirements, but not all of them. And during the discussion, we can maybe talk about that. Many, but not all, and maybe not even a majority of these devices will be connected over mobile operators' 3G, 4G, 5G networks. Maybe, maybe not. But there are going to be billions of these devices that are going to be connected using wireless and fixed that are never going to touch the mobile operators' networks. And they all need to be knit together. Last point, how do we get there in a way that goes across all those verticals? This is going to be industry-driven. It already is. 16 months ago, a number of companies, including Cisco, created something called the Industrial Internet Consortium. At the beginning, there were 60 companies. There are now over 200. Last week, I think the count was 208 from every continent except Antarctica. And it also includes governments, and it includes standards bodies, right? And it is a non-traditional, non-formal standards organization, and that is exactly where these questions are going to be resolved very effectively. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robert. Next, we have Nuala O'Connor, President and CEO, Centre for Democracy and Technology.
So it's a delight to be here, and I learned from my many, many years at GE not to use slides anymore. So I've done my time with the PowerPoint. I'm just going to talk to you today about people. So it's a great joy to have worked at great companies, Amazon, GE, others, but now to serve in this role at this global NGO, really focusing on the rights of the individual. For those of you who don't know CDT, we are a 22-year-old advocacy organization, NGO based in the States, but with offices around the world. And we were originally focused on privacy and freedom of expression as our two pillars. We do work in all of your areas, in net neutrality and a whole bunch of other important work like copyright and surveillance and some other hot issues affecting the internet. And when I took this job, my daughter Maggie asked me the question, Mom, why do this? Everybody knows what Amazon is, right? Is there anyone here who doesn't know Amazon? There isn't anyone in the world, I think, doesn't even like Amazon, right? It speaks to our need to get things quickly and easily, but it is a little harder at cocktail parties to explain what the Center for Democracy and Technology is. And she said, Mommy, why? And I said, well, you know, we get to work on some really, really neat things. And I held up my phone, with which I was timing everybody, so I should be timing myself as well. Stop, reset, start.
Thanks for that.
And we'll see how I turn out on the time factor. And I said, well, honey, you know, when I was your age, she was at the time was a second grader in an all-girls Catholic school here in the DC area. And I said, well, you know, honey, when I was your age, I read a book, it was probably already out of date, and this was a long, long time ago, that said, someday there will be telephones and you will be able to see the person that you are talking to. And there was a picture of what essentially was a desktop computer with, you know, a curly wire and a handset attached to it, and the person was looking at the telephone. And as a child growing up in Northern Ireland and then moving here, we had just had these long-distance phone calls once a week with our grandparents. And it was back in the day, some of you may remember, when there was a delay, and it was really hard to talk, and then you'd have to wait and hear the person. And I thought this was the greatest idea ever, that there would be a phone and you could actually see the person. I remembered that vividly. I also liked Star Trek as a child. Does anyone else like Star Trek? So my vision of the world is much more Star Trek than Star Wars. And so I said to her, honey, you know, that was my future. And I get to work on things that are in the future. And she said, the quintessential reason, the reason I get up in the morning to do this work is, Mommy, what does my future look like? And I said, honey, your future looks like a world where your house, the walls are screens, and you get up in the morning and you talk to them and you say, computer, what's on my schedule? Or computer, make my coffee. Or computer, what's the news in the world today? This is the vision, this is the positive vision, right, of Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek, is a world of equality and equilibrium and inclusion. And there are moments when we see the internet looking that way, and then there are moments when it doesn't, when it's not upholding its highest promise. It's a great opportunity to be able to tell the story with my child in the room, actually, because it's on school break. I won't point her out to you, but I have told that story many, many, many times, but it really grounds me in the work that we have to do, because this is about the future, and this is about the individual. So the work at CDT is focused on the individual. I want to pause for a minute and say it's been a very hard week. It's been a very hard week in the global dialogue around data protection and privacy, and for those of us who work in that realm, we've had a great setback, and it has really shown the invalidation of the Safe Harbor Accord, which I've always described as a creaky political vehicle that would not withstand the test of time, but it was still the best thing going for a while for those 4,000 companies that had complied. It reveals the real schism we have and the real dysfunction we have in the global dialogue on data protection. We need to get that right. I feel that we have good people in governments, in companies certainly, in advocacy organizations that are well schooled in this, and it's a known. The greater concern I have for the global internet is speech. The threats to speech from individuals, from institutions, from governments are the most compelling challenge we have in developing an internet community, a digital world that upholds the best and highest promise of advancing equality, of advancing opportunity, of creating a new space for all people, regardless of race and religion and gender and color. I am very concerned because it is one of the hardest questions facing all of us today. And it's a conversation we're having in the US, in Washington, in Brussels, and elsewhere with governments and with good companies to try to think about how we engage in the best and highest form of speech, how we engender the most respectful conversation without treading on the rights of others who may speak in a way that may be antithetical or really distasteful to us. These, to me, are actually some of the hardest questions facing the internet community today. And I think the dialogue has begun, and we've certainly started at a CDT, that the intersection of identity and community, of speech and of power, are some of the hardest conversations we need to have. The incidents we've seen over the last year, from the revelation of non-consensual sexual imagery, to revenge porn, to the data breach at Ashley Madison, hopefully none of you were involved. I actually know someone. I do. I know someone who was on the list. To the kinds of dialogues that are causing newspapers to take down the comment sections because they have become so intolerant. To the attacks on Sony and Charlie Hebdo. We made great fun in the States of the attack on Sony and the revelation of emails that were embarrassing, and certainly ones that many of us were glad we had never sent. But the attack on the creator, the attack on satire, the attack on the individual filmmaker and artist, as well as the potential attack on all persons who wanted to see it. As good or bad a film as you think it may have been, it was an attack on speech. Similarly, the attack on Charlie Hebdo's offices. As distasteful as you may find the content of that magazine, it was an attack by extremists to silence speech. But the response from our government and governments around the world is to clamp down further, to attack further. The requests from governments to Twitter to take down accounts have resulted in 20,000 Twitter accounts being taken down in the last year. And yet, members of the US government are saying the company has not done enough. To me, 20,000 sounds like a lot. I think they may have done too much. And I'm a huge fan of Twitter. I was tweeting just before. But I am concerned. I am concerned that we are living in such a fragile society that we fear speech, but also that the kinds of speech we are engaging in on the internet are not bringing out the best and highest in any of our characters. But even greater, I am concerned about the very real threats and the very real desire of governments around the world to say, it is the internet's fault that there are terrorists. I was born in Belfast in the 1960s. There were plenty of terrorists before there was an internet, and there will continue to be so. It is not the medium, it is not the vehicle that is the cause, but we must be mindful about the risks and to the individual's dignity and voice in those calls to take down speech. So what to do? I can't say that I have the answers. I can't say that we have come up with the answers as a community. I do know that good companies are working on these issues. I think of it as a form of corporate social responsibility in the digital age. There are wonderful people at Facebook, at Google, at Twitter, at Microsoft who are thinking hard about the relationship of the individual to their own data, what we call your digital self, your persona, your self-representation, your existence online, your sense of ownership in it, and your sense of your ability to expand upon it. We know that there are good companies and good folks in government service and elsewhere thinking about the issue of how to not monitor, but encourage the best and the highest use of the internet and use of digital platforms to engage in dialogue. Because without that kind of thinking, we really do face an imbalanced world. These threats to speech, again, not only coming from the government, but coming from other individuals, have been proven to be highly gendered, and in many cases, very much reinforcing existing power structures. And so I would say to you, in the conversation about speed and about access, which is obviously fundamental, and about the ability to use these great technologies to make a better world for all of us, to remember the individual and their digital dignity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuala. Next, we have Kevin Martin, Vice President, Mobile and Global Access Policy, Facebook.
Thank you all, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I guess I wanted to start out by saying that this is a really tough panel to be on. I don't think I've ever been on another panel where one of the other panelists was timing us to make sure we stay on time, and that I was struck when I sat down with that. Bob also started out by referencing that it was important to be nice to regulators, and I had the privilege of serving at the commission with Bob. And anyone who knows Bob won't be surprised for me to tell you that when I had a dumb idea, he told me so, directly. And so I'm not sure it was always nice, helpful, but I'm sure it was always nice. So at Facebook, we are a mission-driven company. So, and Facebook's mission is to give people the power to share and make the world a more open and connected place. And so I wanted to start out by just talking for a few minutes about the most recent usage trends we have at Facebook and what we're seeing on a global basis. And Facebook today is, there's about 1.5 billion people who access Facebook on our monthly active users. So on a monthly basis, you've got about 1.5 billion people accessing it. 1.3 billion of those are accessing it over a mobile network, although I was hesitate to say it that way after Bob's earlier comments, but they are accessing on a mobile device, I should say, instead. And there's about 1 billion people almost on an average day that access Facebook. There's about 968 million people who access it on any average day. And Facebook is increasingly important not just for individual users, but for small businesses. You have about 40 million small businesses that are utilizing Facebook today in very important ways to further small business growth. But we have another, increasingly have another focus of our mission as well. Sorry, I skipped it through, and that's to bring internet access to the remaining 2/3 of the world who are not yet connected. And why is that? And that's because most people still have never accessed the internet. So you've got about 3.2 billion people, or 43% who have, but you've got over 4 billion people who are unconnected today. And of that 4 billion people, you've got a variety of reasons why they're not connected today. But certainly in the developing world, it's an increasingly important challenge. About 95% of those with no access live in the developing world. And about 1 billion of those people approximately probably have lack of infrastructure access. About another billion of those probably have lack of access because of conditions around poverty. And then there's about 2 billion people there's a combination of both not understanding the value and of the expense that it can end up being for them. And so what are we missing by having the rest of those people not being connected today? So the value of connectivity, just to give you some overall statistics that were done by Deloitte in combination with the GSMA report, is that if you could bring up the level of connectivity in the developing world to the developed world, this is what the result would be. There'd be 140 million new jobs, 640 million children would be given access to cost-effective learning tools, 2.5 million people lives would be saved, and about 1.3% increase in overall economic growth and activity. And that's what we're missing by the previous chart, by not having enough people connected. One of the things we end up trying to estimate is that for about every 100 people that are connected, about one person can be lifted out of poverty. And so going back to those barriers of access, what are those barriers of access today? As I said, about 1 billion of those people will probably lack basic infrastructure. And so that's got to be one of our challenges that we have to end up tackling. There's about another billion who it's a problem because of low income and the affordability. And then there's about 2 billion people who it's a combination of awareness and relevance to their lives. So when we try to take a look out at the world and see what kind of data connectivity that there is available, and Bob referenced this earlier, you actually see in the developing world, about a third or 32% of the population is covered by a 3G signal. But today, about 90% of that population is covered by a 2G signal. So to the extent that you can get IP content that's capable of being delivered in a 2G environment, you can dramatically increase the ability of people to get online. And so with these challenges and with the current infrastructure the way it is, the Facebook has started the Internet.org initiative, and there's two components to that today. And the first one is a free basics service that I'm going to go through and talk about in some detail to try to address that awareness prong that we were talking about. And the second is our Connectivity Labs component that's going to try to address the lack of infrastructure. So let me go through and describe our Free Basics program. The Free Basics program by Facebook is trying to give people a set of free access to a set of locally relevant basic content and services via a mobile app and/or a mobile web browser, so that you can get access to a set of free basic services that will be able to give you an introduction and to see what it's like to be able to be online. And we think that this can introduce people to the benefits of connectivity, and it will really serve as an on-ramp to the broader internet. And it's important to understand from Facebook's perspective, this is a program that we've started, and when we launch it in a country, it's open to any of the operators to end up participating. We actually encourage and want all of them to participate and help us get the rest of those countries online and utilizing this set of free basic services. And so what are some of those basic services that are included? There's 250 different services that are available throughout the world, and they vary from country to country. But in every country, we have some subset that makes sure we include some basic information like news and weather and some kind of search component. We have some kind of communication capability. We make sure that there's health information, both general health and particular for basic access to basic health like maternal health. We have educational components, job skills, information about jobs that are available. In India, for example, we've got Baba Jobs that's been a critically important component of trying to get additional job information out and available. We have financial information that can be important from agricultural perspective to banking perspective. And in many cases, we also, but not always, have e-government services that are available. We try to make sure we work with governments in every country when we launch this to ensure that where possible that e-government services are also included. And so far, we've launched this service in 21 different countries all over the world, in South America and Africa and India and Southeast Asia. And so what have we seen so far in terms of the results? Oops, just step through. And so what we've seen is that you've seen a dramatic uptick of being able to get people online. indeed almost twice as fast as previously. So you've been able to bend the curve in getting additional folks online. So what we've been able to see is, on average in all the countries where we've launched, within 30 days, you see 50% of the people who go on and try our free basics subscribing to the full internet. And that's not a one-time in the first 30 days, that's a rolling basis. So for every month that the service is up and available, you see 50% of those people moving over and subscribing to the internet. And that's resulting in people getting online twice as fast as they were before us launching in these countries. Now, we've also made some recent changes to the program. First of all, we renamed the program to Free Basics as opposed to internet.org. And one of the reasons why there was concern that was raised that we were confusing people as to whether this was the full access to the internet, and this wasn't our intention. Our main intention was to make sure it was becoming an on-ramp where people could try these basic services and then become full internet subscribers. And so we've changed the name and changed all the marketing to make sure it addresses that concern. We've addressed and tried to improve the security of the program and made some privacy changes as well. And most important, we've also made sure that we've launched the Free Basics as a platform so that any content provider can participate as long as they meet the same technical guidelines. And most of the technical guidelines are all structured around making sure that the application is not bandwidth intensive, that it's a data light service. So you can't have streaming music, streaming video, high resolution photos that are available. And we remove all of that from our site so that we meet the same technical standards as well. And indeed, I should just point out, we actually remove all the advertising off of the Facebook site that's available on internet.org as well, so that we don't have any incentive for people to be staying on that site. We want them to be moving over into the full internet as well to be able to access the full Facebook experience. So as I said, this isn't the only program that we have. We're also concerned about how do we connect people with that don't have access to any infrastructure, and we have connectivity labs that are focusing on a variety of the ways to address this challenge. We've developed our Aquila project, which is a unmanned aerial vehicle that will be able to fly for months at a time, solar powered, to be able to have broadband interconnection down to medium density areas. We've just announced that we're going to be partnering with Eutelsat to be able to offer internet access directly from in the sub-Sahara in 2016, to be able to make sure that we provide access to the folks that are completely unconnected as well. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing kind of all of those different prongs for the people that are not available and not online today. Because we do see this as critically important for not only for Facebook, but for our economy as a whole. And we think that this is something that we can all end up addressing through different creative means. And we think that the regulators should make sure that they're both aware of these programs and are also understanding what they can actually try to accomplish. So with that, thank you. And I don't know, Nuala, did I make my time frame, or what's the time?
Hang on. Yes.
I had to talk fast. Thank you all very much.